You've probably heard that you need $2 million to retire comfortably. But fewer than 2 out of every 100 American households have actually saved that much in a 401k or IRA. If you're in your late 50s or early 60s right now, chasing that $2 million number without understanding what it really buys you can quietly wreck your retirement. Because the number on your account statement isn't the number that pays your bills. What pays your bills is what's left after taxes, Medicare premiums, and a rough stretch in the market take their cut. Here's the gap nobody warns you about. The 4% rule says $2 million should hand you about $80,000 a year. In practice, once taxes and healthcare costs are factored in, a lot of retirees are living on closer to $40,000. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between a retirement plan that holds up and one that quietly runs out of road by your late 70s. I want to show you exactly why that gap exists, and the 3 checks that tell you whether your number is actually enough, or whether you need to adjust before you hand in your notice. Only 1.8% of American households have saved $2 million or more in retirement accounts, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute. That's fewer than 2 out of every 100 people you know. Even $1 million is rare. Just 4.7% of households have reached that number, and among people who are actually retired, only 3.2% have $1 million or more sitting in a 401k or IRA. So when you hear that $2 million is the retirement finish line, you're being measured against a number that almost nobody actually hits. Take Mark and Lisa. They're both 63, living in suburban Ohio. Mark has a 401k worth $1,450,000. Lisa has an IRA worth $280,000. Add those two together, and you get $1,730,000 in retirement accounts. They also own their home outright, worth $420,000. On paper, Mark and Lisa feel like they're almost at $2 million, and they're planning to retire next year. Here's where it gets tricky. Mark and Lisa are actually counting 2 very different things as if they were one. There's what you can spend, your 401k, your IRA, your cash in the bank. And there's your net worth, which also counts your house, your car, whatever land you own. A calculator that adds those together makes you feel richer than you are, because your house doesn't pay the grocery bill. You can't spend a room in your kitchen. If you've ever said, "I have $2 million," because you counted your house in that total, you're not lying. You're just making a dangerous assumption about your cash flow. Mark and Lisa's $1,730,000 puts them in the top 5% of savers in the country. That's genuinely impressive. It still isn't $2 million, and the gap matters more than people expect. The median retirement savings for people between 65 and 74 is $200,000, according to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. That survey is the closest thing we have to a full picture of how much American households actually hold, because it pulls from real account data instead of guesswork. Next to a median of $200,000, Mark and Lisa's $1,730,000 looks enormous. But size alone doesn't tell you if a number is safe. It only tells you how it compares to everyone else. Here's the fragility path. Mark and Lisa retire at 64, follow the 4% rule, and withdraw $69,200 in the first year. After a 22% effective tax rate and roughly $5,000 a year in Medicare Part B premiums they hadn't budgeted for, they're netting around $49,000. That number holds up fine until one of them needs long-term care, which can run $8,000 to $14,000 a month. At that pace, their portfolio is in real trouble well before either of them turns 80. Now here's the resilience path. Same couple, same $1,730,000. They work 2 more years, use that time to convert some of their traditional IRA money into a Roth IRA while they're still in a lower tax bracket, and build a cash cushion of $150,000. Their real spendable income settles between $58,000 and $73,000 a year, and it lasts well past 90. Same savings, same house. A completely different outcome based on how the money is structured, not how much of it there is. If you're within a few years of retirement yourself, this is exactly why I put this video together. Subscribe to Wes Investor, because next we're walking through the 3-step stress test that protects a nest egg from the 2 dangers most financial advisors never bring up. I used to think $2 million was the magic number too. I spent years running my own projections, assuming a steady 7% return and forgetting to subtract taxes. It's part of why I make these videos now, because that assumption nearly cost me years of retirement I didn't need to lose. That $69,200 withdrawal looked solid on paper. After taxes, Medicare surcharges, and 1 bad year in the market, Mark and Lisa were living on far less than they expected. And that's before we even get to the part most retirees never see coming: the risk hiding in the first 5 years after you stop working. The $2 million target hides 2 real risks that most retirement calculators never show you. The first is sequence of returns risk. It's not just whether the market goes up over 30 years, it's what happens in the first 5 years after you retire. If the market drops early, and you're pulling money out at the same time, you lock in losses you can never earn back, even if the market fully recovers later. 2 retirees can have the exact same $2 million and the exact same 30-year average return, and still end up with completely different outcomes purely based on which years the bad ones landed in. The second risk shows up later. Healthcare costs tend to stay manageable through your late 60s and early 70s, then spike hard after 75, when long-term care becomes a real possibility. Depending on where you live and the level of care needed, that can run $8,000 to $14,000 a month, and Medicare does not cover most of it. Here's a 3-step stress test that shows whether your number actually holds up. Step 1. Run the first 5 years forward, assuming a 10% drop in year 1 and another 5% drop in year 2. If that scenario alone would force you to sell investments at a loss just to cover living expenses, you have a sequence risk problem, and the fix is a cash cushion of 2 to 3 years of expenses so you're never forced to sell low. Step 2. Stress test what happens at 75. Add $100,000 to your expected medical spending for the stretch between 75 and 85. If that addition drains your portfolio years earlier than planned, your current withdrawal rate is too aggressive for what's actually coming. Step 3. Calculate your real number. Take your $2 million and subtract the present value of expected long-term care, which runs somewhere around $250,000 for a couple. What's left, roughly $1,750,000, is closer to your true spendable retirement number. Not the one on your account statement, the one your plan should actually be built around. This matters because the on-paper number and the real number can be $250,000 apart, and that gap is exactly where people get blindsided. One recent analysis of $2 million retirement portfolios found that once inflation, taxes, and health care are all factored in, real spending power often lands around $42,000 a year. That's less than a third of what the raw 4% rule promises on paper, and it's clear evidence that the sticker number and the usable number are two different things. Here's the part that actually fixes it. The fix isn't saving more. It's restructuring what you already have. A cash cushion of $150,000 to $200,000 held in short-term treasuries covers 2 to 3 years of expenses, so a market drop never forces you to sell stocks at the bottom. Pair that with Roth conversions done in the years between retirement and 73, while your taxable income is lower than it will ever be again, and that same analysis shows real spendable income climbing from $42,000 up to somewhere between $58,000 and $73,000 a year. Same savings, completely different result. I've been in Mark and Lisa's position myself. When I ran my own numbers with a 3-year cash cushion and a withdrawal rate that adjusts down after a bad year instead of staying fixed, I realized my original plan had me running out of money roughly 5 years earlier than I thought. That's the moment I started building stress tests like this one, before I ever thought about sharing them. So the math is fixable. Taxes and health care can eat $30,000 to $50,000 a year out of a $2 million account, but a cash cushion and a couple of smart conversions close most of that gap. What's harder to fix is what's happening in your head, because even once the numbers work, there's a mindset that keeps a lot of people from ever spending the money they've saved. You've spent 30 years training yourself to see every dollar you don't save as a dollar wasted. That instinct built your $1,730,000. Now retirement asks you to do the opposite. Spend the money on purpose. And for a lot of people, that switch just doesn't flip. You check the balance every morning out of habit. You compare yourself to the neighbor who mentions their $2 million portfolio at the block party, even though what they actually get to spend every month might be identical to what you have. The number they say out loud isn't the number that matters. I get it. I've felt that same jolt when the market drops 10% in a week and my balance falls by $150,000 practically overnight. It feels like failure, even when nothing about your actual plan has changed. Here's the part worth sitting with. Your net worth was never your spending power. Plenty of the 1.8% of households who do have $2 million aren't living any bigger than you are. Many of them are just as afraid of touching it. This isn't a character flaw, and it isn't a sign you did anything wrong along the way. For 30 years, the entire system rewarded caution. Every raise you didn't spend, every bonus you rolled straight into the 401k, that was the right move at the time. Nobody trained you for the day the goal flips from accumulating to drawing down. Feeling uneasy about spending a number you worked decades to build isn't weakness, it's just an untrained muscle. There's a small shift that breaks this habit. Set up a separate checking account that receives one fixed transfer from your portfolio every month, like a paycheck. Mentally, that transfer is your income. The rest of the portfolio stays out of view, off limits, not something you check daily. It sounds almost too simple, but treating your withdrawal like a paycheck instead of a shrinking pile of savings changes how it feels day to day, even though the math underneath hasn't moved at all. Give it 2 or 3 months, and the daily balance checking tends to fade on its own, the same way it faded when your first paycheck from a new job started landing automatically, instead of requiring you to invoice for it. Once you stop watching the total balance and start trusting the paycheck, the next question is how that paycheck actually gets set, because the 4% rule you've probably heard on a podcast isn't built to flex when a bad year hits. There's a better way to set it, and it's the difference between a plan that survives a rough decade and one that quietly runs dry. There are 3 moves that actually change how long $1,730,000 or $2 million or any number in that range lasts. The first is Roth conversions, done in the years between when you stop working and when required withdrawals kick in at 73. Every year you move money from a traditional IRA into a Roth IRA, you pay tax on it now, ideally while you're sitting in the 12% bracket, which in 2026 covers up to $50,400 of taxable income for a single filer. Converting $200,000 over 5 years in that bracket might cost around $24,000 in tax today. But it can save more than $60,000 down the road because it shrinks your future required withdrawals, which lowers your Medicare premium surcharges and cuts how much of your Social Security ends up taxed. The second move is the cash cushion, holding $150,000 to $200,000 in short-term treasuries or a money market fund, currently paying around 4% at the short end. Its job isn't to grow. Its job is to be spent first during a bad market year, so your stocks get time to recover instead of being sold at a loss. Think of it as the buffer between a bad headline and a bad decision. Without it, a market drop forces a sale. With it, a market drop is just something you read about. The third move is switching from a fixed withdrawal to a dynamic one, sometimes called guardrails. Instead of pulling the same 4% every year no matter what, you take a little more after a strong year and pull back after a weak one. Historical modeling shows this single change can lift a portfolio's odds of lasting 30 years from around 76% up to roughly 95%. That's not a small edge. That's the difference between running dry in your mid-80s and having money left for your children. None of these 3 moves does much on its own. A cash cushion without the Roth conversions still leaves you facing bigger required withdrawals and higher Medicare surcharges later. Guardrails without a cash cushion still force you to sell something during a downturn, just a little less of it. The 3 together are what actually hold up under a bad 5-year stretch, because each one covers a gap the other 2 leave open. Here's what that looks like for Mark and Lisa. Picture them following the fixed 4% rule with no cash cushion. The market drops 15% in year 2 of their retirement. To cover living expenses, they're forced to sell stocks at that lower price, locking in a loss they can never earn back. Now picture the same couple with a cash cushion in place. That same bad year, they simply spend from the money market fund instead. Let their stock holdings sit untouched, and by year 5, their portfolio is roughly $200,000 larger than the version without a cushion. Same market, same $1,730,000 starting point, one decision, and a completely different trajectory. You now have the 3 levers: Roth conversions while your tax bracket is low, a cash cushion sized for 2 to 3 years of expenses, and a withdrawal rate that flexes instead of staying frozen. Put together, they're what actually separates a retirement that holds up from one that quietly runs out of road. But there's one more variable that no calculator accounts for, and it might matter more than any of the numbers we've covered so far. Let's bring this together. We started with a number that sounds like a finish line, $2 million, and found out fewer than 2 in 100 households actually reach it. Then we uncovered the trap hiding inside that number. Your net worth and your spendable income are not the same thing. and confusing the two is what makes people feel richer or poorer than they really are. We walked through the three-step stress test, sequence risk in the first 5 years, the healthcare cost spike after 75, and the real number left once you account for both. And we talked about the mental habit that keeps people from spending money they've legitimately earned. Here's the piece that matters most, and it's the one no spreadsheet shows you. The $2 million target means very little if you ignore the years of good health you actually have left to use it. I've heard from people who reached $2 million and still couldn't enjoy it because they waited an extra year, then another, and by the time they stopped working, their health had already changed the plan for them. Don't let the number become the whole decision. Calculate what I'd call your health-adjusted number, the version that accounts for the years you're likely to have the energy and the health to actually use the money, and let that number help decide when you retire, not some figure you saw in a headline. If you're still not sure whether your own plan holds up, subscribe to Wes Investor. New videos come out every week that walk through the real numbers behind retirement myths like this one, the kind that usually never come up in a 15-minute meeting with an advisor. You're closer than you think. The goal was never the number on the account statement. It's having the freedom to live the way you want, on your own terms, while you still have the health to enjoy it. I'll see you in the next one.